The federal government has said it will pursue a more aggressive revenue mobilization strategy to slow Nigeria's rising debt profile, which currently stands at over 152 trillion naira. This was outlined in the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper presented as a guide for government spending and borrowing in the coming years. According to the document, the government plans to expand the tax base, strengthen compliance, and digitize revenue collection across ministries, departments, and agencies. Figures in the document indicate that Nigeria's debt-to-GDP ratio stood at about 40%, while debt servicing accounted for over 60% of federally retained revenue in recent years. The framework also projected gradual reductions in borrowing through increased non-oil revenue, cost savings, and tighter expenditure controls. The government said it would expand the tax base, improve compliance, and deploy digital systems to reduce revenue leakages across ministries, departments, and agencies. Nigeria's inflation rate eased to 14.45% in November, according to the latest figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics. The figure represented a decline from the previous month and was driven largely by a slowdown in food inflation, which remains the biggest contributor to headline inflation. NBS data showed that food inflation, though still elevated, recorded a slower month-on-month increase, while core inflation, which excludes farm produce, also moderated. Urban inflation remained higher than rural inflation, reflecting rising transportation, housing, and energy costs in major cities. Despite the easing of the inflation, year-on-year price increases remain significant, indicating that household purchasing power continues to be under pressure. The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee shared less than 2 trillion naira among the federal, state, and local governments in November. The decline was attributed to reduced oil revenue, lower company income tax collections, and fluctuations in other major revenue lines. Data from the committee showed that statutory allocations and derivation funds were distributed across the three tiers of government, but overall receipt fell compared with previous months. Oil revenue continued to be affected by production challenges and global price movements, while non-oil revenue also underperformed projections. The lower allocation has raised concerns about fiscal pressure on sub-national governments, many of which rely heavily on monthly FAAC disbursements. The chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Taiwo Oyedele, clarified that only taxable Nigerians would be required to obtain a tax identification number (TIN) and that students and dependents without income were exempt from the requirement. Oyedele, speaking during a media engagement in Abuja, dismissed social media claims suggesting that all bank account holders would need a tax ID to operate accounts before January 2026. He explained that the requirement, anchored in Section 4 of the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, scheduled to take effect on January 1, 2026, applies only to individuals who earn income from trade, business, and other economic activities. Oyedele also noted that those who already have a TIN will not need to register again under the new framework. Banks are expected to request TINs from taxable persons, but individuals without income, including students and dependents, are not obligated to obtain one. The clarification was aimed at addressing public concerns that the new law would force millions of Nigerians to obtain tax IDs simply to hold or use a bank account. And that's business news on Global News. In Abuja, I am Tom Sinime Natus.